Hello, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. I hope we're all home, out of the traffic, and ready to talk tech this Tuesday. Now, we are here today to talk about AI, data, and digital trust. I have with me this evening Samantha Sims, Naomi Blackwood, and Matthew Williams, all having beautiful CVs, beautiful resumes. But I'm just going to sum it up really quickly for you. Miss Sims is a digital compliance attorney, a strategist, and a global thought leader shaping the future of ethical technology. She is the founder of Information Collective, which helps tech companies to navigate the world of digital compliance. I don't know if she still calls herself this today, but I found out about her as the DPO doctor. So she basically does a coaching program for DPOs, data protection officers. We also have Miss Naomi Blackwood, who is a data privacy consultant, and she combines regulatory discipline with practical business application to strengthen data protection practices. She's a certified information privacy manager and a certified information privacy professional. And we have Mr. Well, the only man on the panel this evening, we have Mr. Williams, Matthew Williams with us. He's a consultant at Securus Limited. He's a legal and privacy, data privacy consultant. He's also a practicing attorney. And Matthew will tell you that he specializes in the development of robust privacy frameworks, data mapping, risk mitigation, and the implementation of comprehensive data protection strategies. Now, today I was scrolling social media and I saw on BBC News the AI bubble is about to burst. And I want to start there. I want to start there with my panelists because, of course, we're here to talk about AI, data, and digital trust on the road to BizTech conference coming up November 26th and 27th. So I want to hear from them, and I'm going to come up with a quick excerpt. It says the largest AI hub is going to be built in India, so larger than anywhere else in the US. That is what Google said a couple hours ago. And I want to hear from my panelists because basically India has emerged as a key destination for AI data centers, and Google is saying that it is a massive leap for their digital future, innovation, and global standing. That is where money is going. Data is power today. Let me hear from you as we start our tech talk today. I'll start with Miss Sims first.
Well, that's hot off the press. I missed that. Okay, look, to me, that's no surprise. Over the last, 20 years or so, we have seen the growth of an IT sector within India. We've also seen a data protection law, which is pretty robust. India has always been strict about data security. India then went on to be very strict about overseas transfers. So it doesn't surprise me that a country as populous as India, with the large BPO companies operating, for example, Infosys, the Accenture one, Genesis, and a number of others operating in that area, servicing large parts of the world, with massive data centers actually within India. As I said, robust regime around data, and they've gone on to start to talk about AI as well within their legal regime. So it doesn't surprise me at all. Here's what I would say, and this is what I bang on about right now. My colleague also, Rishi Maharaj, whom some of you may know out of Trinidad. Why are we not architects of our own destiny as well?
Yes.
This is the future of humanity, okay? We are talking beyond societal need right now. And I say big props to India and the BRICS nations and Africa and everybody else that is reclaiming this or pioneering into this new frontier. Mm-hmm. Well done. And I can see it actually happening, but let's not be fooled. Right now, we are living in a situation where the US is even coming down on Europe right now, asking Europe to scale back on its digital regulation in order to allow the tech titans to push forward, okay, with what I consider to be rather unethical practices that is going to affect those of us in the global south. So we need to really think about, yes, Google may be saying that, but as we've seen in recent times, our friends just across the pond,
Yes.
yeah, they ain't letting it up. You get me? As we
Yes.
say in London.
But before you wrap up, Samantha, and talking about us pioneering our own destiny, tell us a little
Mhm.
bit about the work that you have been doing in AI and with any groups or so on.
Yeah, so as you, some of you may know, I am the chapter chair for the Women in AI Governance for the Caribbean. And one of the areas that we have been focused on recently is bringing together people to actually opine on and provide sensitization to the world on the state of how AI is going to affect the health of Black women. And as you know, this is a conversation, especially for those of us, those people in the diaspora who are facing inequity of healthcare because we are marginalized people and the
Yeah.
healthcare systems are not designed towards us. And beyond that, you know, what's coded in is obviously geared, if we are not the architects, it's geared towards other people,
Yeah.
and we are the people to be likely to be affected. Aside from that, as part of my consultancy and also my law firm in New York, we work on helping clients to build tech that is very much embedded with AI. Yes, it'd be silly not to right now. Um, but you, you know, making sure that tech is ethical and
Okay.
that not harmful to others. And then on a more Caribbean level, one of the one of the main points is I've been working to sensitize the region around the need for us to have data centers and infrastructure which we own.
Okay. Sounds good to me. And we're going to come back to that point of ethical AI very soon. But I'm going to jump to Naomi. The AI bubble is about to burst. What are your thoughts?
Yes, Chavanese, hot topic. And people are excited about AI, and that's because, it produces quick results, produces, fast information. But at the same time, I think we have to think about, as Samantha mentioned, we have to consider the ethical aspect of it, how it affects individuals. And in using and relying on AI, I think the focus should be on understanding how certain decisions are made and making information available to individuals so they understand how decisions are made, how those decisions really affect them. I think it also is important to the point of sensitization, meaning that persons really, I know you're excited about using AI, but as a result of me sharing my data or inputting my data into a system, right? What can I expect? What are the possibilities? What are the potential risks of me doing that? So I think whilst we're excited, there's the other aspect of considering the risks that are that accompany that, and ensuring that we have proper protections in place.
Sounds good to me. And over to Mr. Williams.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we're seeing is a recalibration of the market surrounding AI, really. The large part of what we've been seeing is just speculative enthusiasm with respect to, what AI will be, how it will evolve. Really and truly, it's just like any other market adjustment. We're becoming a bit more mature and grounded in our perspectives with respect to AI. So that's why you'll hear persons like Samantha, Naomi, echoing the statement of having guardrails in place to ensure that we're not just trying to use AI as a value add, but that there are ethical considerations with respect to deployment and so forth. So even in relation to India, yes, it's great that there's going to be a data center set up, but the reality is we have to look beyond just this notion that we'll now be able to make things a whole lot easier, and that India will be the one of the major players in the AI market. Fundamental is one consideration of the environmental concerns surrounding the use of AI. I mean, you're talking about setting up a data center in a country that has had historic record
Be
temperatures.
careful, Matthew. Be
And so
careful.
and so therefore, as we contemplate the rolling out of AI, these are some of the considerations that need to be had.
Okay. Yes,
Stephanie,
Samantha. Yes.
yes, would you mind if we just touch back on this AI bubbles about to burst? In fact, one thing we have to remember is that this is not siloed. And so Matthew made a really good point about market correction. But actually, what we're seeing and what I'm seeing, and I typically give quite a lot of advice to investors, VCs, etc., who are seeking to decide whether they're going to invest in technology. What we're actually seeing is a scaling back on investment in AI. The prediction is that in 2026, we will see a significant drop off. And what it reminds me of, and for those of us who've been around since that time, it reminds me of the dot-com boom, when every man and his wife was a web designer, had a web platform, had a web this, had a web that, right? There's only so much, as Matthew said, that can happen within that time. The other thing that we're really seeing is we thought 2-3 years ago, pre-chat GPT, we thought we were going to see AI systems being rolled out and the use of more agentic AI, certainly a little bit quicker. But also we thought AI was going to be built into the systems, think Google Glasses, etc. We thought we were going to see much more stuff like that. Actually, what we're seeing is AI talking to AI, everybody depend chat GPT, Grok,
Yes.
whoever, Claude, Copilot,
Gemini. Yes.
right? And so what we're really seeing is just generative AI. So we're seeing limited use case. We're also, to Matthew's point, we're seeing a lot of speculation from businesses, from the big corporates in particular. But we are not seeing a lot of these projects really manifest. So what we're getting back from the large corporates, the FTSEs and Dow and everything else, is actually AI has been rolled out, but it is not delivering the revenue that people thought it would, or even the efficiency savings.
Yes, yes, and I that was also a point on BBC News recently where the CEO of JP Morgan was saying that the scaling back is going to be more significant than we can even imagine. So that's a good segue to go right into data and its power and its ownership. So I want to ask you now specifically, as data becomes more valuable, because we all say, data is currency. So as it becomes more valuable, how do you think ownership and responsibility is to be shared between individuals, businesses, and governments alike? I want to start with Naomi.
All right. So this matter of ownership is a long-standing discussion from legal standpoint for a long time now, right? But I think I want to move away from that a little bit because the matter of ownership of personal data I think is not in the same way as you know you'd possess something tangible, right? But I think when we talk about ownership of data, the focus should be more on accountability and justification, right? So what lawful reasons are being utilized for you to use the data, right? So when we talk about ownership, we're talking about and or sharing responsibility, right? We're talking about the individual who contributes their data, right? So I give my data to be used, and in that sense, it means that I have certain rights to that data, right? They may not be absolute, but I have certain rights in the terms of access, rectification, right? But at the same time, when I share that information, because the data moves from one point to the next, when I share that information to an organization, no, that puts the organization in a position to start exercising a duty of care with my information, right? So, and in exercising that duty of care with my data, right, the organization must ensure that it is applying the correct legal basis to be using my data. And then we want to look at in terms of the government. And I think the government also shares a dual role in this as a regulator and also as a custodian, right? Because the government does access my data and use my data in particular ways. But as a regulator of my information, the government stands now to ensure that they're putting policies in place, that they're putting mechanisms in place to ensure the protection and the safety of my information. Um, and this issue of ownership is nothing new,
Right.
because there's this case of Henrietta Lacks, right? And this was back in 1951 when she was diagnosed with cervical cancer. She was a Black woman, and the only hospital available to Black people back then, where she was Johns Hopkins University Hospital. And what happened was when she went in for treatment, her information was forwarded, right, for research. This is without her knowledge, without her consent, right? Yes, her data, years and decades later, has led to a revolution in medicine, right? And you might ask, what's the problem with that? The problem with that is that she had no knowledge about how her data was being used before her passing, right? Also, her data was being has since been commercialized, right? So it's being sold um, to different buyers. And then we have her heirs, right? We have her family members who also weren't aware of the fact that her data was being used for research. And it wasn't until um, when the medical individuals went to her family and said, you know, we'd like samples of your cells as well because of how good Henrietta's was, right? That's how they found out about what was happening. So that matter of ownership and responsibility and
Yes.
accountability predates the date of data protection and AI. And I think it, just put things into perspective of, whether, um, you know, are organizations being responsible in how they're using data when
Yes,
we're
Naomi, if
using,
I could just interject right there because I don't want
sure.
to lose that point. Are organizations being responsible enough in terms of the processing of personal data? I've heard Samantha on the matter of ownership on different forums, very passionate about it. And so I want to plug her right there. And she would have heard what you said, Naomi. And I want to know if she's in agreement with what you said and her views on the matter of data and its ownership.
Thank you, Shavanice. And I think, Naomi, you were alluding to this anyway, right? Which is that data in and of itself is an intangible asset. And under most legal regimes, intangible assets are typically incapable of being owned. What we talk about when we talk about ownership of data in respect of companies. And when we're drafting our data sharing agreements, and I draft quite a lot of them for my clients, in terms of migration of data from one company to another. We're talking about the databases. And I think it's important that when we're talking about ownership in the data protection, data privacy sense, we do not conflate these ideas. Some regimes talk about the data owner, including CCPA, etc. In my view, that's a bit shows me the draftsman them wasn't really thinking, but um, it's suitably defined. Then it doesn't mean ownership, but to Naomi's point, it means the party responsible for the processing of that data. And I think one thing that we as practitioners need to ensure that we are doing, especially when we're communicating back to the board or anybody within the business, is ensuring that we're level setting, because language, those two definitions may mean something to us as practitioners, and we can really, split hairs about it. But to somebody else, when you're advising them in the business, especially when you're trying to explain to them why they can't do something, ownership might mean that, yeah, we own that. We can do it. But to Naomi's point, yes, we're talking about the OECD principles largely, accountability, responsibility, transparency, just making sure that we are behaving properly.
Okay.
Digital trust and ethics.
All right. Thank you. Matthew, can you talk to us about any models of data sovereignty that you're aware of that are being explored?
Yeah, that's a very good question and perhaps a beautiful segue. So, just for the benefit of the viewers, when we're speaking about data sovereignty, we're really speaking about those who own, those who control, access, use data, especially in the context of personal and sensitive personal data. And these ideas, these models, really provide, whether it be legal, technical, cultural, or ethical constraints, or at least they should ideally. There are a couple models that exist. I'll pick two to just explore for a bit. So we do have, coming out of Europe, Gaia X. So that's really a sovereign, or what you'd call a federated data infrastructure. So it allows data sharing to take place, but under strict governance. So it keeps it local, which is a good thing. So with this model, what you find is that the data remains under local control, and sharing is only conducted under agreed protocols and governance. Now, this is useful inherently because it means that you have better compliance with regulation. You're lowering the risk of foreign or legal overreach, especially in light of some of the discussions we've been having about some of our neighbors in the north. And it provides a tangible potential for collaboration across entities without centralizing data. So, really and truly, if you're looking for a model that sort of offers some real good safeguards while also guaranteeing somewhat regulatory compliance, sovereign in data infrastructure is a good way to go. But it can be quite costly to implement. And so for that reason, what has been popping up recently, and I was reading a paper on it actually, are personal data marketplaces. So individuals use things like blockchain or smart contracts to let persons share or monetize insights from their data, but they don't actually hand it over. So as an individual, you're able to choose what it is that you want to share, how much it is that you want to sell it for, and in terms of access, you set the definitions as to how that ought to be done. So there's one marketplace that actually comes to mind, which is the Wibson marketplace. But the core point here is that these models provide something that the sovereign models don't have, which is that you have more agency. You get to make the decision as to how it is that you want to benefit, and it brings with that some massive potential, if implemented correctly, for direct economic benefit. And the terms tend to be a little bit more transparent. The obvious challenge with respect to that is, how do we value data? Is my health data worth more than yours? Or is, how do we actually add a dollar figure to it? The enforcement of the usage terms, once I've handed it over, Or once I've given you access to it, how do I ensure that you're using it for the right purposes? And just the fact that it's a developing area, so there is still some regulatory uncertainty with respect to the deployment of
Yes.
these models.
So you touched on the point of transparency, and I want to jump over right back over to Samantha on the matter of how transparent are today's AI systems in showing what they collect and why. You're still muted, but while you unmute, we've seen different frameworks popping up all over the place. AI governance framework here in this continent, in that continent. But I want to zone in a little bit in terms of particular AI systems and any that you want to touch on, any that you want to highlight. How transparent do you think they are?
You know, if I'm very honest with you, I don't think they're particularly transparent, and I'll tell you why. They have been, the big ones have been collecting data for a very, very long time. I mean, I've been pushing back on some of this collection, for example, by Meta, since 2015. I've been involved in contracts where you knew they were building something, you just didn't know what it was. So they've been ingesting the data for a long time. So transparency today, again, it's an area where we have to be a little bit careful, because what does transparency mean? Does transparency mean I have to show you the full inner workings of the system? Do I have to show you the full algorithm? Well, just ask Uber when it went before the courts in the Netherlands, right? You know, do we, to what extent is that algorithm commercially sensitive information? What do I want to know as an individual? I want to know if AI is being used. I want to know if you're using my data for AI. I want to know, yes, where that source of data came from. Do I think that is happening today with most systems coming out of Europe and under the AI Act? Certainly, I do think so. I think we already had some of those duties under data protection legislation. You ask me about specific companies who I think are doing it well. I don't think that any of them are doing it particularly well, because why? I can't make that full assessment. They have been built in the quiet. Did anybody come out and say to us, we're building an AI system and we're going to be using from now on any data that you are using on our tool, on our system for that purpose? So what's interesting, and when I was thinking about this concept around transparency, I have a friend who's built an AI bias tool, and she'll be rolling that out to companies. And I think we need those AI bias tools to allow us to make the assessment of whether companies are being sufficiently transparent or not around use of AI.
Yes.
So there we, you know, I'm sorry it's a bit of a roundabout answer. You asked me about particular systems. Come on, even my Apple with all its privacy enhancing technologies, they done been collecting this information on me for how long?
But I'll take it.
Oh.
I'll take it. I'll take it, and I'll ask Naomi then to tell me. All right, having heard what Samantha said, I want to hear from you. Of course, you're going to say disclosure standards need to be clearer, but I want you to tell me what you think an example of good transparency looks like. What should we expect? What should it really look like? What should it parade as? What should I expect as a user? I'm not hearing you. No, and while we fix
And
that,
I,
I'm going to take it from Matthew in the
yeah,
interim.
sure, no problem. So I hold a much more enthusiastic view. I'll put it that way. That
No, hold on, hold on, hold on. I don't want you to rebut Samantha.
no,
I just
I
want
wouldn't.
you
I
to
wouldn't
tell
attempt
us.
to do so. No, I'm just going to speak specifically to what you've asked, which is, what transparency should look like. So,
Yeah.
I think Samantha touches on a lot of those things when she says that, understanding how my data is used, whether or not my data is actually being used to train these AI models, questions around data lineage, downstream uses. Those are some of the things that you want to know when it is that you're talking about good transparency. I think that Google has done a relatively good job. To be fair to them, it's not perfect, and it's still, in train. But with their model cards, they've attempted to actually summarize how it is that their models are trained, what data sources that they're using, the known limitations for the particular AI bot, and of course, some ethical considerations. And I think we need to move in that direction if we're talking about true transparency. At least it's a first step, because these operators, in the same way that we treat food labels, before I sign up for an AI bot or before I buy food, I should be able to see what the ingredients are. In the same way, before I sign up for an AI platform or a platform that's using I should be able to understand how it operates, what it does. And, to give credit to the United Kingdom, they've published, and this goes back to Samantha's point about, balancing the algorithmic commercial secretiveness that really ought to obtain, but also balancing public interest. The UK has created the Algorithmic Transparency Standard, which requires public sector AI systems to publish three things: a description of the algorithm that's used, the data sets involved, and the purpose and justification for the use. I think those three, as again, initial steps, place us in a very good position from a transparency perspective.
Okay,
So
sounds good.
Shabani, let me just add something. There's three
Sure.
words that we talk about when we're talking about transparency:
Mm-hmm.
understandability, explainability, and visibility.
Yes.
That's it, right? Public sector use is very, very different. Matthew, Google. You mean the same Google that's been offering Google Analytics all these years? That Google?
Absolutely. So
Right.
it's in development. I'll give them that, but I take your point and agree.
When you
Samantha.
stand on you know what? When you've already disrupted and now you're regulated, it is easy to be the good guy.
Yes.
And that's the point I'm making, why I don't buy into those myself personally. What are we building from the ground up? Yes. But the big ones out there right now, I don't want to disagree with you, Matthew, but I'm just making that point that I sometimes think that we're coming from a different position to the tech titans.
I mean, I was listening to Matthew and I was about to ask him, okay, so it means that you're excited about the AI center that is being built in India then? Big supporter.
No, actually not, because again, these are really and truly ideals. This is where we want to be. But quite frankly, when you're sitting down in a boardroom, your main consideration is profit and loss. Let's
Yes.
just be frank. My consideration is not going to be, well, ethically, if we set this up, will the temperature skyrocket because of the water use and heat generation in India? I'm not going to be concerned about that when I'm living lavishly in another country, where I'm perfectly fine. But if we're speaking about those little steps that are being taken, even if it is from the bad guy, I
Yes.
think we can be objective and just recognize that, yes, we're not perfect. Yes, these titans have failed historically, but there are some good tidbits that they've dropped along the way that I think can be taken up for mass use.
Okay, I'll take it. But I want to hear from Naomi. So there's the General Data Protection Regulation, and of course we have the Data Protection Act 2020 in Jamaica. And we know, of course, particularly of the rights in relation to automated decision making, and that data subjects are allowed to request information about the logic used in arriving at decisions in relation to them. But I want to hear from you, having been so immersed in data protection, compliance, and privacy consultancy, what opportunities do you think still exist to strengthen user rights? Still not hearing Naomi, and I want anybody else to take it. I don't know what's going on, Naomi, but the good thing is you were great in the start and you gave us a lot of info. But see if you guys still work on that for us. Who wants to take that one? Matthew, Samantha?
I think it's a funny question, right? Because I love this question. We haven't really explored that. We've really been focused on implementation of the standards that we agreed in the early 80s, which I think we agree are the right set of standards for that period. One thing that I think we need, especially those of us in countries like Jamaica, implementing standards from abroad effectively, is I would like to see the rights contextualized and culturalized. That's something I've been banging on about for a long time, because I sometimes wonder if we're actually, it's not about thwarting innovation, but are we thwarting our own cultural identity in some ways when we implement standards from abroad, right? So as you know from my accent, as everybody knows, I'm British, yeah?
Yes.
But even doing business down here is a lot more familiar, just in general, than doing business in the UK, for example. We become a lot closer. It's just the cultural side of it, right? We talk more openly, and you may share information more openly about somebody else, and it is not a problem. Yeah. Say such and such is not very well right now. Da, la, 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 la. You go and do that somewhere else. Big data protection breach. I know somebody who brought their whole hospital that she worked for to court for because her manager told somebody that her son was unwell and she had to leave the office today. So that's one of the concepts I
Yes.
would like to see as we bed down after implementation. I would like to see our courts start to localize, culturalize, contextualize privacy for us.
So on that point, Matthew, do you agree with me when I say we have an issue in terms of evolution? So the laws are drafted and they're beautiful on the shelves. Things and times change, and the laws do not evolve to keep up with digital transformation. Let me hear you on that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And we see it when it is that even outside of data privacy, we have laws that are from the 80s with $50 fines. And everybody, is up in arms and wondering how is it that somebody could have committed this crime and we're charging them $50. So part of what it speaks to is the fact that states, governments, in their as part of their legislative role, have just quite simply let the ball drop. We have this thing where we like to gold plate and we push out legislation and then we say, all right, everything is good, and we only take it up when it is that there is something gravely wrong in society that we need to address. And so governments have become overly reactive when it comes down to data privacy. I think as we try to move towards addressing this problem, we need to begin looking at greater stakeholder collaboration, firstly, to identify what the specific issues are. And
Yeah.
I also think that we need, and when I say we, I'm speaking about both private sector and perhaps even public sector, civil society interests should seriously consider lobbying the government on these things. Because what tends to happen is that there's uproar for a few days, it dies out, and then we're back to square one, when in reality, the effects of having outdated legislation, especially in the context of, whether it be AI or data privacy, is so far reaching that it really ought to be taken seriously.
Yes, sounds good to me. And I want to ask both of you. I remember a conversation about an AI task force, and there was a post cabinet press briefing. Have you heard anything about the AI task force in Jamaica since then?
I believe they're still going through under Chris's leadership. And what's encouraging is I don't know about it. Anyway, I digress. UNESCO did an assessment of our preparedness for AI. Look, we're moving forward.
Yes.
And I think sometimes as Jamaicans, naturally, culturally, we give ourselves very hard sticks to beat ourselves. We are doing fantastically well at coming from a developing country
Yes.
and grappling with these issues at the same time as dealing with a plethora of other issues at the same time as being subjugated. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what would I have liked to have seen from the task force, and what I hope to see from the task force going forward, and now that Chris is also on the Carry, is it the CARICOM, the wider Caribbean kind of task force, right? What I would really love to see is a lot more advocacy
Mm-hmm.
for our region, our people
Mm-hmm.
within the digital society.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. But on a global scale, though, what industries do you see struggling more with digital compliance?
You want to take that one, Sam, or you want me to?
Yeah, you can. I'm gonna have to think about it. So yeah, go ahead, Matthew.
All right, sure. So I think that, well, and this is just from an observation point of view. Financial services seem to be having a hard go at it. So
Why?
particularly insurance and fintech. I think it's because a lot of these organizations, these industries, they operate on highly data intensive models. So, they utilize complex third party ecosystems, they use analytics, and they're, again, in recent days, we're seeing a lot of use cases for AI to be sort of enveloped within a lot of these core systems. And so, for this reason, oh, and there's also this aspect as well, that a lot of these industry players are actually moving away from some of their legacy systems, which were never designed with privacy in mind. And
Yes.
so when you look at that, and there's this case in the UK involving TSB Bank, where they were fined £48 million because they had inadequate oversight of legacy IT systems, and
Heard
that
about that.
caused data unavailability. Right.
Yes.
So, from a practical perspective, I think that industry has been having a rather hard go at it. The other, which is perhaps a little more obvious, is retail marketing and e-commerce. So players, again, in this particular subset of the industry, tend to struggle because of an over reliance on everybody's least favorite thing, which are cookies, tracking, and behavioral analytics. And so they have to contend with those, plus complex content management across website and apps. So I think they're having a pretty rough time. Practically speaking, though, I think that there's some things that they can do, and I'm sure that you'll touch on some of those things, or Samantha will touch on some of those things.
Yes, Sam.
I disagree with Matthew. I don't think the finance industry is struggling with digital compliance. I think that we sometimes what we see as struggles, because we see so many issues coming out of one sector, is sometimes skewed by the fact that near enough everybody has a bank. So you're talking, when I'm dealing with fintech, or if I'm dealing with a bank, I'm dealing with insurance, I'm dealing with some of the highest number of data subjects that I'm going to deal with. Same as travel. There's some industries that's just data intensive in terms of personal data intensive. So me personally, I'm just coming back from Bermuda and being at a compliance conference in Bermuda, which is largely around banking, fintech, insurance, etc. I actually think they've been having a good go at it. Where I think banking is really struggling is in digital transformation, because for some reason they just can't get the blockchain right. Yeah, and it's like it's been 10 years now we've been doing these projects, and you still cannot get it 100% right. We're in crypto, etc., but we're not seeing what we should be seeing. However, on the contrast, I think Matthew's absolutely correct that the industry that I think is, I believe, is struggling the most is digital advertising. We're just not seeing the advertising revenue come back. And is it that they're struggling with compliance? It's not the compliance they're struggling with. It's that compliance has actually impacted impacted the operations, and therefore the market revenue. It's just not there. They need to find a different way to handle this. They've been trying consent or pay, all sorts of models. and it's not true consent. They just can't get it right.
Yes.
If they were struggling with compliance, then they would be doing it and we'd be getting the fines. And do you understand me? So that's why in my head, the question was, I think I was being a little bit too specific with the actual question, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it's probably digital advertising, retail, as you said. How do they get our eyeballs without it? So that's why we're seeing bad TV right now, because
Yes.
there's no investment for it. Netflix can't find nothing to put on. They cannot afford Dave Chappelle. I want my Dave Chappelle to come back. Do you understand? That's what's going on for us right now.
I mean, I get that. And we often talk about the larger companies in the large industries. But on the point of the startups, how do you think they can balance data driven innovation with privacy and trust in this day and age? Matthew.
Me? Oh.
Matthew.
Okay, don't worry, Samantha. I thought she was going to ask you to go first as well. But yeah, I think the reality is that startups do face a resource constraint, and
Yes.
that's generally what tends to allow them to sink or swim. But I think startups have a unique opportunity to sell trust as a differentiator, and I think I'm not actually seeing that in the market much. It's our view, or my view rather, that if you instill privacy by design from day one, embed simple policies that map data lineage, consent status, address matters such as retention, it will reduce the likelihood of function creep. Apply things like data minimization from the outset so that you only collect what is ultimately going to drive your value proposition. And if you do that while embedding things like pseudonymization or anonymization within the analytics pipeline, your insights will be able to flow without exposing identity. And I think we have to look at startups in the context of the generation that they're going to be serving. A lot of the users, especially Gen Z, appear from studies to care deeply about how their data is used. I say appear because if you really and truly look at some of the things that my generation signs up for, you really wonder. But nevertheless, I think if we have radical transparency through, just simple language, I think gone are the days when I need to be reading a 10 or 20-page privacy notice for it to explain
Yes.
how it is that my data is used and how it is kept and so forth.
Mhm.
And if startups begin to treat their users as stakeholders and not data sources, I think we'll see some real balance in terms of privacy and trust, and of course the innovation that they desire.
Yes, and I think I have Naomi right back with me, and I'm gonna jump to her.
Are you hearing me?
Naomi, yes, we're hearing you, and I'm gonna jump right to not a moment to breathe. Do you agree with me that startups tend to struggle with acknowledging privacy rights of data subjects more so because they are so eager for growth that when they come up with project ideas, they're ready to jump on it, ready to launch because there is money to be made and we have to move now. What do you think?
Yes, Shavanice. Well, I would say I agree with you to some extent, but we've seen that there's a shift, especially in the face of data privacy, where we have startups are favoring a privacy first approach, right? And we also see where investors are moving to engage startups who are invested in that approach, where they're saying that privacy is not a hindrance, it's not a roadblock to our innovation, but what it does, that it positions us in a way where we have a competitive advantage and we can build brand loyalty, we can build the customer experience, right? And what that looks like is entities ensuring that they have, for example, end-to-end encryption in place, right? They are pursuing a privacy by design approach where we're looking at the risks to individuals. We're considering how the operation, how when we use the information, when we create this system, when we deploy this system, how might this affect the individual? So they're looking at putting the safeguards in place. They're looking at ensuring that they have mechanisms to facilitate persons exercising their rights. They're also putting things in place to ensure that we don't just have a policy, right? But we have, it's not just words on paper, but there's implementation. So we see where there's not necessarily a friction between innovation and privacy, but there is what's the right word? Um, that they have
Synergy.
reached that synergy. Thank you very much, Matthew. They have reached a place where they have made that synergy
Okay. All right. Naomi, you cut off at the
have I
end
been
there,
lost
but I think we
again?
get it. So they've reached a place where the synergy is what's working for them. Correct? Are you still hearing us? That's okay. All right. So I mean, personally, I would like to meet the people from those startups who, they have the privacy first mentality because I've never seen it. Everybody's just ready to jump on it, make their money, and oh, there's compliance. Let's get
You
it done.
serious,
Why do
Japanese?
no, never. So I've heard the complaints over and over and over from the big and the small. Oh my gosh, why do we have to be doing this? The government just wants to stress us out some more. But it would be a pleasure to meet some people from those startups. But I wanna touch on the point of ethics because you raised it earlier, and that's where we're gonna go. And I think it's gonna take us right to the end of this session. So I wanna hear how you recommend companies to balance the deployment in terms of ethics and usage. So how do we balance ethical deployment and usage with the ever-changing needs of the organization? Because remember, a company, they're going to want to put their interest first. And every day you'll hear them jump and they'll say, oh, legitimate interest. Oh, we had to do this. Oh, it's for our policies. Oh, it's for our processes. But how do you recommend? How do we balance the ethical deployment and usage with the ever-changing needs of the organization? Samantha.
All right. Well, to start off, for the last 5 years, two of my best products, my best solutions for clients. One is my startup to MVP solution, and the other one is C to Series A. If you do not have privacy built in as a small business, I can tell you this: you're not getting no money. You're not getting any investment because, as I said to you from the beginning, one of the other things that I do is I advise investors on whether a particular landscape that a potential investment is operating in is a viable, allows for a viable investment, right? So I don't tell them about the money. I tell them about what do I see happening on the regulatory landscape, on the market, etc. So in terms of ethics, I always find this question really interesting, especially when we're talking about us in Jamaica currently.
It's AI deployment now, so in
I
terms of
know, I
yes.
know, but it says again, we can't think of these things in a silo.
Mm-hmm.
It is not, oh, now I think AI brain, now I think this, right? So what the point that I am making is we are sitting here calling for a republic to completely unshackle ourselves from colonialism and its predecessor of slavery. Yet still, which slavery was justified on what? Commercialism overrode ethics. We always knew it was wrong to capture people. We always knew it was wrong to force people to work. They ain't new. Yeah, we knew that a long time ago. So it's the same thing now. When we're questioning whether innovation will thwart will be thwarted by digital ethics. What is digital ethics that is so bad that we're concerned about innovation thwarting it? What, the right to treat people fairly? Which one? Respecting people's privacy? Their right to a private life? Their right to consent? Operating transparently? You know, which of these factors of ethics is so bad that we would want to see, that we think that we need to move forward with innovation? So what can we do? Right, firstly, we need to free ourselves of bias. And so what do? I do digital compliance assessments. I do a lot of bias assessments, right? Free yourself of bias. You need to go through the actual system, tool, product, whatever it is you're doing, and you carry out that assessment, and you have at the end of it a list of risks and the mitigations that you'll put in place, right? Once you have that documented, you have a very undeniable truth around the impact of something on digital ethics. If so, I always say, if it comes down to the law, or if it comes down to wanting to do something that's unethical, miss me out, please. I'm out. You know.
Yeah.
So I always struggle. No, that's not true, because I spend my whole time balancing ethics and innovation in that respect. But you want to show yourself as a practitioner that you are obviously commercially savvy. But what you're trying to do is not egregious. It's not, you're not trying to bring in some gold-plated standard. But especially in a place like this, where the question around digital ethics doesn't come from here. The question around innovation thwarting digital ethics actually comes from a place where they still erode ethics for commercialism and innovation. But I don't really think it's our question to ask sitting here. Yes, we want to do business. Yes,
Yeah.
we want to compete on the global scale. But actually, this is our opportunity to stand up. And if we're going to talk about reparation and republic in one voice, and then want to be completely eroding digital ethics, allowing for color bias, allowing for gender bias, allowing for all sorts of indiscrimination on the other hand,
Yes.
financial bias, etc., then there is some serious cognitive dissonance.
Yes, and I agree we have a problem. Naomi, what do you think? 60 seconds.
Yes, I agree. I hope you're hearing me.
Yes, we are.
Right. So I'd say ways of ensuring a balance are one is ensuring a culture, right? Creating an organizational culture where ethics is understood to be, trust and accountability is the norm, right? Where people are responsible for the data. So we hello.
Yes, we're hearing you.
Oh, sorry, cracked up a while ago. All right, so we're in a place where we're encouraging staff members, right, to feel safe to question our systems, right, to challenge the decisions, so that when we're deploying those systems, we want to ensure that those systems are ensuring that the systems are efficient, right? So we want to ensure there's human accountability. Yes, we have a system in place, but who is accountable? Who do we speak to? Who is the person that we seek information from? We don't know. We need to have someone in place or a board in place where we're ensuring that we have these systems being audited. And when these systems are being audited, we're looking at whether those biases, we're identifying those biases and how to correct them, right? So when we talk about about ethics. We want to ensure that there's a balance, and the balance isn't necessarily between
Naomi.
efficiency and ethics, but it's more. Hello,
Yes, you're gonna say Shavadis is
can you hear
always
me?
cutting me, but guess what? I'm out of time, and I want Matthew to give me three words to take us out this evening. Ethical
Okay, okay.
deployment, balancing, all of that. Come, Matthew, quickly.
Yeah, cross-functional ethics boards. Simple.
Love it, love it. Cross-functional ethics. But look at that. Folks, follow the Jamaica Technology Digital Alliance at the JTDA on all social media platforms. Look out for us on the 26th and 27th of November for BizTech conference. You just might see Matthew there. You just might see Naomi there. You just might see Samantha there. And you just might see me there. Who knows? So we look forward to seeing you. And thanks for staying with us this evening. Remember, the AI bubble is about to burst. Ensure that you're a part of the team that is voting for digital ethics. Have a good rest of evening.